Hey. I think maybe we can even start. We have quite a stable number for 2-3 minutes. So welcome everyone. This is sadly going to be our last meeting from the Radio Society for now. The society is going to be dormant starting from October because nobody applied to become a board member. So in case anyone interested now or after or at any point, the society can still be activated. You just have to contact ISA then. So today we want to talk about artificial intelligence and the future of radiology. And I put this little emblem at the right lower corner of the slide because I want to at least mention the summer AI course that I did, because a lot of the information that I'm going to talk about today I got from them, and I get them recommended from our university. So in case someone will get the same mail next year, I can recommend to apply. It's totally for free with a scholarship, and it goes 10 weeks, and it's amazing. So let's start. So we subdivided today's topic into 4 parts, Maurice and I will start with digitalization in general, then the terms artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. And then Maurice will continue to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence in like everyday life and some examples. And then I continue with AI in radiology and what we might be seen in the future. And after each part, we ask if someone has a question, and then you can raise the hand with the hand button because everyone is silenced. All right, so about digitalization in general, I'm going to start with that. And I like this little map, we can call it, because it shows different parts, it's aspects of digitalization. There are more aspects definitely, but basically it starts with this big set of data that is quite unorganized usually and needs more like typical algorithms are not even enough to comprehend the data. So we need fields like data mining and data scientists to work with this big giant pool of data, and also programmers that deal with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. And as you can see here, artificial intelligence is kind of like an umbrella term, and machine learning is a subtype of it, and deep learning is a subtype of the machine learning. So this summer, I did a little road trip to Estonia with my boyfriend, and there we went to the National Museum in Estonia, and they had a huge section about digitalization that I found quite interesting. And so I thought I will use Estonia as an example of a nation that basically underwent digitalization already, because they decided after becoming independent that they're going to focus on that, and they want to become a little bit more similar to Scandinavia in comparison to the other neighbor states. So I'm not going to talk about every single point. I'm going to start here with the X-Road. What does X-Road mean? For Estonia, it meant that they connected all the governmental institutional websites together, and they called that the public internet, the X-Road. They connected banks, telecommunication companies, also the tax system, as you can see in 2000 already, state portals. And this obviously has positive and negative sides, because if someone hacks the system, all these institutions are affected by it. So that automatically then brings us to public safety. And in 2007, what happened was that Estonia was attacked by 128 cyber attacks. 17 of them were in less than 1 minute, and 78 were in between 1 minute to 1 hour. So that's a huge amount. And it was the first time that a whole nation was attacked by cyber attacks. And they attacked all different kinds of, like, the Estonian presidency and parliament, the banks, the telecommunication companies, everything that is included in this X-road. And even the emergency service, because they added health as well, the public health sectors, the emergency service number was enabled for 1 hour. And even if Estonia is a small country, it could be a high number of people that were maybe calling the emergency number in that specific hour. So what did the Estonians do to fight the cyber attacks? They built the computer emergency response team. And what was special about it is that this was then not governmental ruled. It was basically private companies or even private hackers coming together and fight the cyber attacks together. And they cut 99% of this fake traffic that came mostly from outside of Estonia. So the story behind that is that it was pretty stupid, actually. It was just a monument in Tallinn from Russia. And after they became independent, they wanted to move this monument to the outskirts of Tallinn. And so most of this fake traffic, they found out, came from Russian servers. They could never figure out exactly who was behind it, but they had an idea roughly where it came from, let's say it that way. And then CERT got also help from all around the world, from other internet supplying services. They cut this fake traffic as well. And countries like Spain, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, they founded this CERT as well. And after that, the NATO then opened Cooperated Cyber Defense Center of Excellence. They called it in 2008, and it's the first of that kind. And there in Tallinn, these people working there, they're mostly volunteers training military people, private hackers as well, who learn how to fight cyber attacks in the future. So now we had these attacks, but then they thought about what can we do long term? And that's when they implemented blockchain. So the ones of you who use or who are into cryptocurrency, they probably know how blockchain works. But basically, if you buy coins, then they are put in like a key, which is basically a chain of numbers. And then this is sent to multiple networks, and they all together have to approve the transaction, which makes it pretty secure that no one can just change it or and only after these approvement, this chain or this key is then added to the blockchain. And then the transaction is complete, and afterwards there can be made any changes on this key without all these networks noticing it. And Estonia thought about this mechanism, and they used it for their systems as well. They called it a little differently, but it's the same mechanism. It uses less energy than the blockchain from cryptocurrency, which makes it a little better for the environment, let's say. But in that case, we have a data file that is combined with what they call a hash, a private signature. And again, this data file is transferred into a chain of numbers. And then this needs to be approved again by the whole system, and then is added to the blockchain. So it's a similar mechanism. The patient or whoever is the owner of the data can still access it, or people who have the authority, but no one else can do any changes on that data without the rest noticing. And this is the new warm model of the X-road, which looks a bit more complex, but as you can see along the X-road for like visualization, they put the security server, so that everything is secured with these blockchain mechanism nowadays. And I know that other countries, like for example, Finland, they're also thinking to implement the same. So the last I want to talk about is the EHealth, because that's obviously interesting for us. And the Estonian healthcare system works in a way that everyone who goes to a doctor there automatically receives a digital health record. And then in this record, everything is like put together, and then it's secured with this blockchain method as well. But the patient again can access it. And it is identified with the electronic ID, because everything is digitalized in Estonia. And 99% of healthcare data are digitalized. 99% of the whole country's data is already digitalized, which is impressive to me. Again, there are always negative and positive aspects, but it's a pretty high number. And 99% of all the prescriptions are digitalized. And what is great about that is that 2.3 million queries by doctors every month can be done digitally. A lot of patients just need a new prescription every 3 months, let's say, and they go to the doctor just to get a piece of paper, but the doctor doesn't even look at the patient in this moment because it's just about the prescription. So I think that's great. And also 100% of bills are electronically, so less paper is needed. E-ambulance is the last point for the e-health that I want to mention, because I haven't heard about it before. And that basically means that when there is an emergency call and the ambulance is driving towards that location, they can already look up the e-file of the patient and check like what kind of treatment the patient is maybe taking currently, what kind of blood tests analyses were done before, urine analysis, and they can already have a picture of the patients before arriving to the location, which can speed up the process then. And one question for everyone, I'm not going to give an answer for that, but what I found very interesting, and I haven't asked myself before, is the question of institutionalization. So the Estonian president from 2006 to 2017, that was Thomas Hendrik Ilves. He also fought the cyber attacks in 2007. And he summed up a conference from EU countries where they talked about cybersecurity. And he said that the job of the EU would be to have the same legislations and same rules for everyone, because patients need to be the owner of their data, but they also should be able to access it wherever they are in the EU. And what he also said is if the EU is not able to ensure this, then there is this vacuum, this gap that is unfilled, and that someone else will step in, like private companies, to fill this vacuum. And then in a presentation from Magda Rosenmüller that I heard in the summer, she raised this question: do I prefer to give my data to the government where it is regulated, or to a private institution, which automatically brings up the question, do I trust my government even? And that obviously highly depends on in which region we are, which government is ruling at that moment. Do we have elections upcoming? Tons of different factors, but it is an interesting question to ask, because at some point, maybe a private company will then overtake if it's not the government. And one example could be Apple, because they already have several medical application systems like the Apple Watch or something. And maybe one day they will even provide telemedicine or psychological therapies online or other things that we maybe might not want or want, depends. So finally coming to AI, machine learning, and deep learning. AI is basically this umbrella term that exists till 1950s already. And as I said before, machine learning and deep learning are subtypes of it. And machine learning exists since the 1980s. And it basically means that the algorithm is able to improve by itself. And then in deep learning, it is related to several neuronal layers that I will explain in the next slides. So I asked you on Instagram before, does artificial intelligence work similar to the human brain? And this is when I checked around 12 or something. I think now the numbers were even a bit more similar, not 50-50, but almost, which I like, because I don't think this is a black and white answer as like many things in medicine. Next slide. The artificial networks, they're inspired by how our brain works, but they're not the same, obviously. So here you see a neural, an artificial neuron and a human neuron. And in the artificial neuron, we have an input layer, and we have hidden layers, and we have an output layer. So if we just look at this neuron, we can compare the input layer to our dendrites in our human brain. And in the artificial neuron, they use weights, which would simulate for our brain the neurotransmitters to activate a function or to deactivate a function, or transmit a signal or not transmit a signal. The summation function here would be the soma in the human neuron, where all the weights are summed up. And then depending on if it was like a negative weight, a positive weight, we have a threshold that we can call the activation function, and then an output. And the output is usually 1 or 0, and we can maybe compare it to the axons of the human neuron. That's very, very simplified, of course, but I think enough for us. When we come to machine learning now, machine learning, we can subdivide in supervised machine learning and in unsupervised machine learning. And that means supervised, that we give our algorithm an input and already a target. And in the unsupervised, we don't give them the prediction already. So in supervised, we can subdivide it in classification and in regression. And the classification basically means that the input that we give them, that the algorithm classifies it in different categories. And in regression, it means that the algorithm should find the relationship among these inputs that we give the algorithm. And for the unsupervised, we can see the clustering in the picture. It means that we tell them, we not tell them what we want the algorithm to predict. In the supervised, we tell the algorithm before what we want the algorithm to predict. In unsupervised, we don't. And in the clustering, we can let the algorithm cluster the inputs. And the density estimation and dimensionality reduction, these are techniques that potentially we could use them on supervised learning as well. But here with the density estimation, very simplified, we can, for example, find like outliers, parameters that are in the outskirts that we might want to exclude. And in the dimensionality reduction, we also use these techniques to reduce our data. Maybe we want to extract some features to minimize the data. Yeah, I think a more simpler picture is the next. So this one is pretty famous. If we give a machine learning algorithm labeled inputs for cats that are also labeled as cats, and then we give them 4 pictures with 2 cats and 2 dogs, then the algorithm can simply tell us these are cats and these are no cats, 0, 1. Pretty simple answers. This table, just one more time, sums up the differences in supervised learning. We have labeled input data in unsupervised, we have unlabeled input data. And in supervised learning, we use this training data set to make predictions. In unsupervised learning, we can make analysis. This is just to visualize a little bit. If we have a network with one neuron, and then we get a linear outcome in the first picture, if we only add one hidden layer, the one in the middle, the nodes in the middle are the hidden layers, then we already get a pretty different pictures, even though you can see that not every line is connected with each other, which is a bit similar in our brain. Sometimes neurons signal, sometimes they don't. And in the next picture now, we get to deep learning, more in the direction of deep learning. We add more hidden layers and it gets a lot more complex, even though it's not that many hidden layers now. And we get quite a different picture. This is, again, just for visualization. Simplified, to compare classical machine learning and deep learning, here we can see that in classical machine learning, we decide what features we want to extract before, then we let the algorithm do the job. And in deep learning, the algorithm does that by itself. This graph shows the data dependence of deep learning in comparison to machine learning. And it shows that at the beginning, they might be similar, but at some point, if we talk about the classical machine learning, it doesn't matter how much more data we put in there, but the performance doesn't increase. The deep learning algorithms, they might need more data at the beginning, but their performance keeps increasing because the classical machine learning has specific tasks, but the deep learning algorithms, they can learn from themselves, they can predict by themselves, they can find things that are not exactly specified before, so they can continue to learn. And then only 2 more slides. Here I want to quickly talk about, it's basically a summary of everything I said. The machine learning can be subdivided in regression, clustering, classification, in supervised and unsupervised, but then the deep learning can again be subdivided in several different neuronal networks. I just want to talk about one, the convolutional neuronal network, because this one is used a lot in imaging, and we want to talk about radiology. So the convolutional neuronal network, next one, you can see here, if we have a fully connected layer, and this is still simplified, but if you think about the other picture with a lot of hidden layers, and then even more, it gets a bit messy and very complex. But then it takes also a lot of time for an algorithm to filter out any features. So the goal is often to simplify this. And in this case, for example, for feature extraction, if we look at a picture, a pixel might be interesting, but we might look at one pixel and don't need to look exactly at the next pixel as well. So in the simplified version here, we can say in the full connected layer, we have 25 connections here. In the locally connected layer, where everyone is just connected to the neighbor, it's already, I think, only 15. And in the convolutional layer, where you can see, you cannot really see it here. It was supposed to be different colors, but it is broken down to 3 connections. And this can bring some bias if we want to look at something that is like a structure that is right next to another one. But if we have a whole image, it can speed up the process a lot. So that is the mechanism that is used in in radiology a lot for feature extraction, for example. And the last slide that I liked is just what is the researcher's role in artificial intelligence and the different subtypes of artificial intelligence. So for like the classic artificial intelligence, not even machine learning, for example, playing chess with a computer where the algorithm is completely made by humans, the rule could be like a child. There are like learning, design, and testing. Everything is human made. In conventional machine learning, we act a little bit more like a parent because we still tell the machine what to do and what we want to have as an outcome. In deep learning, it's then a little bit different because we have the training samples, and we can maybe roughly predict what's going to happen, but not everything, and we don't understand fully every detail of the algorithm. So it's more like a governor that tries to make politics, and it doesn't work out perfectly every single time. So that was that for the first part. In case someone has a question right now about that part, you can raise the hand before Maurice continues.
Sorry, I have a question. It's regarding the imaging. Like, will the imaging, like the analysis of the imaging, will it take over by AI? How do you pronounce AI or artificial intelligence, or how it's gonna be?
So what do you mean? What is
the analysis of the picture? Like if you have like a radiological picture or a CT scan or MRI, will it be like that this AI will analyze the...
Okay. Yeah, I will postpone that question because we're going to talk about that in the last part when it comes to radiology, if that's okay with you.
Okay. So if nobody else has questions, it's also welcome from me. I will try to keep it now a little bit focused more on medicine in general. So yeah, as you can read clearly, I will now talk about where do we use AI right now today, because the way Leonie told us right now was really the mathematical basis, of course, and we have to understand it, but it seems so far different from our nowadays life, and especially from our medical perspective, where we are working in some years, and it seems abstract to understand. So I just wanted to show you that actually AI is all around you. For example, right now Franziska is looking at her iPhone, which was unlocked by Face ID. So already there, it's artificial intelligence looking for the face properties, and therefore able to tell you that it's really just you who's opening your phone. It's the same with Netflix. It will recommend you the newest show or movie based on what other shows you watched, or which you even which you didn't watch. The same with Facebook. What content you will see depends on what you watch and what you like. You have all Siri on your phone, or the Android version where you are able to talk to your phone and it is understanding you and even following your orders. We have all on our computers, we have the word checking where we are checked by our Grammarly mistakes. Spotify is recommending our songs. MasterCard has an AI powered system to check that all the transactions are really possible performed by you. For example, that if you are paying one day in Riga and the next day you're somewhere in India, it will ring some alarm bells. Of course, it's still possible, but then you will be on some watch list. Instagram the same, even Google Maps. And the smart home is coming so much more. And then of course the Tesla, it's the future of the self-driving cars, some say. So of course there we can see artificial intelligence even more, but this is of course just a very small aspect of our everyday life where artificial intelligence is already present, and it's so much more than you could possibly imagine. So this is just to show it's already here and it's continuing to come. And we can't stop it if we like it or not. So yeah, I think Leonie has to skip the pictures, to skip the slides for me. Yeah. So for example, this are two other things we are not usually seeing in our everyday life. For example, one is the way how Amazon is logistically using AI for their warehouses. So it is not anymore that there are people walking around collecting your stuff, but they have the robots who are driving the whole regals to the people who just take out the stuff which you ordered. And then there's also AI even able to draw pictures which humans will find aesthetically attracting. So I don't really know for what we are using it, but it's possible. So yes, what I really want to tell you about is the next slide. Leonie? Sorry. Yes, because the question was also if you have heard about the bioconvergence, and some said yes, probably most haven't heard of it. So yeah, and I'm really excited for this because the bioconvergence is the same thing of artificial intelligence and technological advances coming together with the medical sector. So basically the last century, the 20th century, there was the medical, the biotechnological sector, and the technological sector, where software and engineering were playing the most part of the roles. And just now, basically the last 10 years, it started, and now it's really taking off that those two sectors are coming together and creating synergies, which will for sure change the future of the whole healthcare sector. And I'm trying really to just shortly show you how it is already done nowadays in the medical field and how it will hopefully, or anyway, change in the future. And as you can see also here, of course, there's the artificial intelligence and the big data as one of the biggest points of the 21st century of the software side. And as you can see on the biotechnology side, we have in general just the drugs from chemical to biological, and also now the digitalization of data and coming together to gene therapy and a lot of more stuff which will come in the future. So yes, I want to start with the pharma. So please go to the next slide again. Here, I don't know how good you can actually see it, but this is just showing you a small part of all the companies, private companies, which are doing research right now with artificial intelligence in the pharmacological sector. So those are right now happening. We have a lot of companies who are using AI just for identification and validation of literature, or scanning patient data for something other researchers may have overseen the last years. A lot of companies are using it really to model new drugs and use it to predict side effects, or use it how to prevent those side effects. And actually also they are using the AI to actually do the development of it. So they are creating organisms which will then just synthesize your drug which you want. And also in the post-approval state, AI is really helpful to just scan the data, to keep up on everyone, on all the patients, and to validate that everything is really good. And this is just showing that also in pharma and in the healthcare sector, AI is already used, and it will not really go away, because pharma and the massive data amount of pharma research is really perfect for AI, because so many data. And I don't know who of you is already writing the thesis or who already did it. It can be really exhausting, and having a computer do it for you, of course, will be a huge help for you, let me tell you. And so here we have the three main factors the AI will help in. So of course we have already talked about the improving of drug safety and reducing of side effects and risks. It can continuously monitor the manufacturing and the processes in real time, and it will really be able to determine complete drug efficacy and safety, since it can, for example, read out all the lab data, and it can focus on the smallest changes, which a doctor may maybe not be able to. Yes, then something else I also want to tell you, which is an app actually, which some of you might even have on your phone. It's called Mindswins. So on the next slide again. Yeah, this one is a health tech startup, as you can see. And it's basically a really advanced cycle tracker, if I can describe it like this. So basically you type in all your data every day. How are you feeling? If you have any complaints, if you have any symptoms, especially during your cycle. And with this, it's helping women all over the world already to be, for example, diagnosing polycystic ovarian syndrome in just 3 months, compared to previous data of 6 years, which it took doctors and physicians to diagnose it before. So, and this just by pressing in your data every day, and then the app is comparing it to others, and it can tell you faster what you might have. So this is a really interesting thing that it's already happening right now. And on the next slide, we can see what else it's happening right now. So the question already came. Yes, already now the first models are detecting some lung cancer from CT scans. Of course, it's not really sufficient enough, but it is already in the early stages, let's say like this. It is already assessing cardiac health, for example, in the EKG, even the ones we get at Stradins University, in the top layer, which usually is cut off because we are supposed to analyze it for ourselves. The very basic AI is already giving the most logical diagnosis. And if there's a big if the EKG machine would be always set to the actual patient, like the age, the weight, sex, and everything, those would be really, really close to what's actually going on. And also here, of course, the new models and software updates are really helping. And I mean, nowadays, as Leonie said, people have the Apple Watch, which is a huge step in this direction also. AI is also able to classify skin lesions and moles just via camera or pictures. And it's also used by ophthalmologists to identify retinopathies from eye images. Yeah, so I think this is really cool. Another example, I wanted to talk about Hungary, because there is a private company with their smart report initiative, who are really taking over the general healthcare system there, because they have the smart report. It's basically a system, artificial intelligent powered system to analyze the lab tests and all the diagnosis codes previously performed on the patients, together with medication and demographics, at all the sex, race, age, and other things you could possibly type in. And together with deep learning and machine learning, Leonie told you about, they are creating those models of most likely diagnostics, of most likely therapeutic rates, which drugs they should get in how high doses. And yeah, it's actually really amazing how fast they have taken over the whole system. And this brings us back again to the bioconvergence, that from now on, sorry, there's this exponential rise, because someone said, would be nice if I had actually known who said it for a quote, but in the last 10 years, our world advanced as fast as never, but it will never advance so slow as it is today. And I think this is really something we have to understand, that the faster we go and continue, We will therefore create possibilities for 10, 20, 50 years, which nowadays nobody can really imagine. And yeah, so the bioconvergence. Now I want to tell about genetic therapy and in general the bioconvergence and AI in medical field, but therefore we have to talk about gene sequencing. So yes, now on the next slide you can see the costs of completely sequencing a human genome. And I don't know if you have heard about it, but in the 2000s, there was the Human Genome Project. I hope you've heard about it, which was funded by billions of dollars. And it took almost 10 years to really get the genome of 10 or 12 people. And nowadays, it is really possible to sequence a full human genome for less than $1,000. And if you can see this trend from, I think it's 2004, something like this, where it would have cost $100 million to sequence your own genome, if you say so. And from there on, it is really going completely downwards, predicted with Moore's law. Do you know Moore's law? Somebody? Probably not. Maybe not. Okay, yeah, basically he said it that he was a computer scientist in the 70s, and he predicted that every 2 years, the amount of transistors in microchips is going to double. And actually, it was not completely like this. It was even faster, but yes, he was right with this. And if you turn it around, because the production costs were stable, you could say you can produce way more for a way cheaper price. And the same thing we could say for genome sequencing, or if you break it down, basically you can say it for everything, for every technological advance. And especially, of course, since there was the second generation sequencing, the new next generation sequencing invented, there was a huge price drop. And if you look at nowadays scale, 2020, here it's over. I mean, the last year, probably most labs have stocked up on PCR machines for doing their corona testing. And also a new next generation sequencing methods have been performed. So I'm sure nowadays it's even less and just 500 euros or something. Of course, this sounds still a lot, but if you would compare, for example, this first 100 million to something more reachable, and if we would say 2004, those 100 million would have been one nice Lamborghini Aventador for $313,000. Then this one Aventador would have cost just $3.13 in early 2020. And if you see this drop in price, then I think if it continues like this, maybe in 2025, we will be able to have a genome for just $1 or $10, which will then bring us now finally to the next slide, because this one will enable extreme precision medicine. Because if we are able to take the complete genomics, the complete transcriptomics, epigenomics, proteomics, phosphoproteomics, and metabolomics, everything that's encrypted on your DNA, everything that's going on in your bloodstream, and if we can use all those data to put them together in an AI network to help us understand what is better for each patient, we can then identify really a precision medicine model for patient A, B, C. We shouldn't use drug A, for example, while patient D really needs drug A, and patient E will need it in a double amount of dosage. And this is for sure going to revolutionize healthcare. And also oncology, because here on the next slide, we can see that also nowadays in 2021, in oncology, they're actually starting to use the precision medicine because, of course, especially in oncology, where there are a lot of different types of cancer, it is unfortunately really hard to find a treatment for every individual patient. And therefore, the cancer genomics have been the focus of the last 20 years. And there nowadays, we assume that 95% of the main mutations have been identified. But in general, we can see that for molecular profiling and even targeted drugs, there's still a low amount we have reached. And of course, artificial intelligence has to be implemented also in all the oncology sector. Yes, then on the next slide. Okay, yeah, so basically also here we have in the genetics, we have of course huge data sets, and AI is really perfect for it. As you can see, yeah, on our next slide again, because I want to give you the example of spinal muscular atrophy. I don't know if you know about it or heard about it, but today for SMA, this is one of the 5 diseases where we have, or like it's one of 5 diseases where gene medication is FDA approved for. And this one actually, it's really interesting to me because when I was first having my internship in, I think it was 2014 or 2013, in Cologne's Children's Hospital, there was a young boy who was just born and he had SMA type 1. So there are 3 types. 1 is the most severe. And basically it's at that point, it was non-treatable and he died really, really quick. And nowadays we have, with the use of AI, we were able to create this gene injection, which is then causing the SMN expression, which is really restoring the levels in the cells to a normal amount. So the spinal cells are not dying off. And of course, this boy would have to get an injection every 2 to 3 months, but he is having a normal life nowadays. So this is the gene therapy, and it's also only with the use of AI that we can identify and move such huge data sets as easy as we can. And I hope that gene therapy will progress in the future. But not only gene therapy, because since Corona, this was probably a little bit forgotten about, but before everyone was talking about antimicrobial resistance, and antibiotics are resistant to, like, not antibiotics are resistant, but the microbes are resistant to all antibiotics nowadays. And yes, the #1 cause of death by 2050 will be the resistance of resistance of microbes, sorry, for antibiotics. And this, of course, it's a huge problem. And we are really needing either new antibiotics, which we could, for example, again, use with AI to produce them, or we could use AI also to push phage therapy back in the focus. On the next slide, you can see the phage therapy. I don't know if you had it in microbiology or something. I will just really talk really briefly about it to not keep you from the actual radiology any longer. But the thing is, phage therapy was even discovered before the first antibiotics were. But the problem is, every phage just has one specific bacteria where it's able to invade it and destroy it. But nowadays, we would have the possibilities to have, first of all, huge data sets to collect the phages and to understand which bacteria they are used for. We have the genome editing and sequencing methods to understand which phage we have. We have the possibilities to change the phages, so we can construct our own phages really just for one wished bacteria we want to kill. And we also have the sequencing methods, which we all saw now during Corona, that we can fast check which bacterial infection the patient is suffering from. So in future, it would really look like this, that a sick patient is coming to your hospital or even your private practice. You would do a throat swab, a nose swab, or taking it from the blood, even depending, of course, where the site of infection is. you would do a fast next generation sequencing ideally, so it doesn't take 1 or 2 days anymore. And with those data, you can order your specific phages, which will be there the next day, maybe per drone delivery or something like this. And yeah, those will just be injected or taken as medication, and only those bacteria will be killed off, and even not the normal microflora will be harmed. So this could be a really good point. Okay, yes, let's get back to, yeah, just again, this slide to keep remembering for everyone, bioconvergence, it's coming. Now I want to talk about the healthcare market in general. So a little bit to give you just an overview for, yeah, what amounts of money we are talking about. For example, you see that now in 2020, we had approximately 4.9 billion US dollars in the healthcare markets, according just for AI. So of course it's really a lot, but if you are seeing the estimations that until 2026, yeah, really 10 times of this will be handled by AI. You really see that this is a growing market. You see that this will be the future, that everyone thinks there's huge potential. And of course, many say, okay, maybe I should not become a radiologist because I will lose my job to AI. And on the next slide, you can see many jobs will be really lost due to AI, but especially in the healthcare sector, most jobs will be created. You could really say there's a switch from uneducated to educated jobs again. So the easy jobs can be saved, kind of, while the educated jobs will be used together with AI. So AI is not taking those jobs, but it's really supplementing them and synergetically helping you to do your job better. And that's of course leading to the next thing, how different nations having different strategies. And here we have the 3 main players, I would say. It's the United States, Europe, and China. And I really think we have to get even the youth to use artificial intelligence as soon as possible. For example, Estonia, as Leonie told you about, is really proud of it, and they're trying to promote it even in school. They have it since elementary school, I think. And even in China, there are the children from 1st grade. They're of course only doing everything on the computer. And from 5th grade, they are learning to code AI. And I think it's really completely different than at least what I am used to in Germany. And I think it's important that our governments, we will switch to embracing the future and try to prepare everyone to it. Yes, but let's go back to healthcare. So we have here the most probable AI applications. So of course, AI will be really good for surgery, because nowadays we already have just the laparoscopic surgery, and their AI will help really more in the robotics, but also just in nursing assistants, because we are always short-staffed, and where we can keep work down by just making the patient order, I don't know, your food on a tablet or something like this, it will be better. But in general, I mean, you can read it all. Everything will be used AI to basically easy down on the work. Okay, now I just want to talk really, really quickly still about deregulation, because of course, since nowadays we are using AI already, but you can see we have really easy levels of AI. So for example, the Apple Watch, which it's not really a medical device, so it doesn't really need regulation. And those CADs systems, like computer-aided detection and diagnosis helping softwares, they are really just on a very low level yet, and people are still supervising them. But in future, when AI is taking over, there will be the need for regulation. So for sure, we will have to think about this also more. So I will tell you now on the next slide a little bit about the EU regulation plan. So they have basically those 4 steps where, of course, first of all, it's developed, and then they want to check the assessment of compliance with AI requirements. And of course, if they're all good, then they will get registered and be able to be used. There should be made this declaration, and it can be placed on the market. And if something changes with the system, then it will have to go back to step 2. But yes, on the next slide, you can also see how huge of a part actually this regulation is, because the EU, they brought out a white paper on artificial intelligence a couple of years ago out. It has 180 pages, and 130 of those are just this lower part of regulation. So yeah, the bureaucracy is real, but of course you cannot leave it alone. And to break it down really, really easy for you, there's on the next slide this pyramid. So basically they want to have those 4 classifications. Of course, if it's no risk or just minimal, then there shouldn't be any restriction. And of course, it's just permitted. And if there's a transparent risk, it is permitted, but there are obligations for transparency. So of course, everyone has to be able to see the data, or some specific regulators. If there's a high risk, then it can be possible, but there has always to be regular assessments. And of course, if there's unacceptable risk, it shouldn't be allowed at all. How they are really defining those risks, it's not really clear yet, so they have to discuss of it. And yes, then in my last slide, I will just tell you about the different levels also of regulation, because as we already talked about, for example, the Apple Watch, which is this digital health device, since it's not really supposed to be a medical device, but it's called digital health device, it doesn't really need a lot of regulation and certification. So this is basically the lowest level you can get. Then there are digital medicine. For example, it's the next level where the regulation is really tougher. They have to give on evidence that their software is improving and really safely recording everything and helping for diagnostics. And of course, the final stage, the digital therapeutics, you can say it's really like the FDA clearing the, if they are going through this, then they have to really give waterproof data for sufficient amount of people. It's basically really similar to the same way. We have been giving out FDA clearance for medical devices and drugs basically the last years. But yes, regulation is also just in the beginning, and in the future, they will have to be more focused on this. So I hope this was clear and I wasn't too confusing. If somebody has some questions. Okay, then remember the bioconvergence.
All right, then we can finally get to the last part, AI in the field of radiology. I didn't see that someone has a question, so I'll continue. So talking about machine learning first, because that's what mostly is used in radiology these days already, and mostly the classification and regression that I explained before. And we use these algorithms for image segregation to divide images, for image denosing and super resolution, which I will show you a picture about. It's easier then. Image retrieval. So we have this huge programs in radiology where we can look at the images, and sometimes it takes a lot of time until the image loads, or which image might be the best of a series of images. So AI can help in sorting that out as well. Image reconstruction, I will also have an example of that. Computer-aided detection, where the computer can already find suspicious regions in an image, and computer-aided diagnosis, meaning that we might have a preliminary report with a diagnosis already, or treatment evaluation. So how does the AI look at an image? Often it looks at patches of an image. So it breaks down the image in several little regions called patches, and then tests each of these regions against a given classifier. So we use this either for detection of, let's say, a lung nodule, or if we want to extract features like facial features. Maurice mentioned the facial recognition in case of Facebook, for example. And the last point I will just skip because we already talked an hour. For the feature extraction, what we usually use, we can use intensity statistics, histograms. These are all just statistical values. We can just look at the picture. With the help of these, we can extract specific regions in an image that are different to the surrounding. In this case, this would be the example of a lung nodule. We can also use the Gaussian filters. This again are functions and mathematics, but in a picture, it basically looks like this. So we compare, what's it in English? Contours, contrasts. Contrast is the right word it looks at, and by that it can help to detect edges in an image. So it might look like this, that we have an original image of the brain, and then we can extract edges from an image, and by that extract white matter against gray matter against cerebrospinal fluid. There's also something called the hair-like features. That would be the case for for facial recognition, where we look at a specific region, for example, in this case of the face, and then the pixels of the white part are subtracted from the pixels of the black part, and we can distinguish features like the eye area usually is darker than the area below the eyes, or the glabellar region is usually brighter than the eye area. And by that, we can identify that it's a face. Then the histogram of oriented gradients. Again, it's just a name. It's better on the picture here. It's not using contrasts, but the direction to detect the edges. And what I found interesting here, this is one example where the direction of the edges could analyze that there were amyloid plaques. As you see in the last row, they had gradients. They looked at the direction with the help of histograms. And in the last picture, you see edge orientation. They saw these little spikes, and these were amyloid plaques. So they could detect amyloid plaques with the help of feature extraction. Another thing we could extract is the shape, obviously, like the volume. We can estimate maximum, minimum diameter. This would be an example of it, where they looked at the suspicious region and they looked at the shape, and they found out that in the first case, it was a tumor, versus in the other case, it wasn't a tumor, it was a malignant brain disease, but they estimated that the tumor is more compact than the suspicious lesion in the other case. And this is obviously super basic still, but it's in the beginning that they already tried to distinguish different tumor types from each other by the help of different features. There are quite a few papers about it already as well. Now the denoising, this is just one example for orthopedics. Maybe people are interested in it. So we can see that the picture on the left side is a little bit less clear than on the right side. So it was with the help of AI, it was the denoised, we call it, and especially in this case for orthopedics, if we look for tiny lines that might indicate a fracture, for example, this could be important, but also obviously for CT scans or MRI scans, which brings me to super resolution images. Here you can see that the one image is an MRI that was only scanned one time versus a proper MRI image where the machine scanned the head 10 times. Now, if you look now, there's a slight difference. So this was the original one on the right side, and this one is an image that is reconstructed only by AI. And obviously it's not perfect, it's not as perfect as the proper MRI image, but the anatomic structures and everything looks pretty good already. If we now compare the AI picture on the left side versus the proper MRI picture on the right side, we can see, I will point it out, that there are minor little differences. Here, for example, what I circled out, it's the little blood vessel that is missing in the AI picture. Or here in the frontal part, it looks a little different. But I think it's pretty amazing already how accurate the algorithm could reconstruct the picture. And we often have, especially in MI, when the person moves too much, we have pictures that are not the best. So that can really help people who have problems with tiny spaces and cannot go through another MRI imaging, for example. Then we just have to deal with bad images. Another thing, radiomics. Radiomics is a big thing in radiology already. It is not just happening in like data labs. And it is a method that extracts large amount of features from radiographic images and uses this categorization algorithms. And then it is used to potentially uncover characteristics that are not possible to be seen by the naked eye, or maybe not by the tired eye of a radiologist that already looked at 100, 200 images. And in the picture row, you can just see we have the original image. There's this suspicious lesion. Then we can use feature extraction and then even more analysis by the help of artificial intelligence. This picture just shows the idea, and I really like it because it means that in the future, I mean, we already have the anatomical imaging, CT, MRI, X-ray, ultrasound. We also already have the functional imaging, like a PET scan, for example. And separated, we also have molecular imaging. We have also nuclear methods to even check for proteins. And there's something that's called genomic radiology as well, where they even try to figure out parts of the genome without invasive procedures. So that is not yet very developed, but at some point, maybe all of this comes together. And then we have a very, very detailed picture of the whole human body up to a molecular level. So they are working on that already, especially for cancer treatment, where the genes are obviously very important, as Marie said. So this, for example, is one case from the Stanford Medical University where they looked at a glioblastoma in the brain, and they looked at they extracted the features, the form, they found out it has a necrotic core, and then they used genome data from that patient and put it together to try to figure out if the genome affects the subtype of glioblastomas. And there had some interesting results there and could classify glioblastomas in 3 different groups. What I just want to say with that is that already these combining of these different imaging techniques is happening. Simplified, if we talk about computer-aided detection, then we use it a lot for lungs already to check for specific lung nodules or suspicious regions in the lungs. And then it always still needs to be checked by a radiologist at this point. And I don't know for how long, maybe that will be like that forever, who knows? In case of kidneys, we use it as well. I just showed here with the pictures, again, they had feature extraction. They looked at the whole kidney first and then at the contrast and figured that there is a different tissue than the rest of the kidney. And by extracting that the algorithm could tell where the tumor is. But this was done with an algorithm that was tested before. So in case of machine learning, again, we need huge amounts of data sets, training data sets, where the input is known and the output is known. So they needed to use that in order to find something. They found basically something that was already known. We use this nowadays, as I said, for lungs, for liver, for kidneys, and I think for pancreas as well. Now, breast cancer. Breast cancer is one of the biggest fields for AI in radiology and a very common tumor type. I think it's even 1 out of 4 of all tumors, and obviously extremely often for women. And it is often associated with microcalcifications. And microcalcifications in breast tissue, they're really hard to recognize. And you see here in my picture, they're all different kinds of shapes of microcalcification. And in this schematic version, it might be easy to distinguish. And I also have some examples. This, for example, would then be vascular type of calcification, which is considered benign. Then we have skin calcification. This is the calcification of an oily cyst, still considered benign. But then we have segmental fine polymorphic calcifications, which are considered as not benign. And these are like zoomed in pictures, that's easier. Then we could have a picture like this, where it's already harder to distinguish the microcalcification in the breast tissue. So this is actually something where I can really help to identify these regions and even the microcalcification. Because here, for example, in a biopsy, they took a biopsy of microcalcification, and the one where the arrow points at, that is a microcalcification that is suspicious, but the others are not. And I mean, for my naked eye, it looks pretty similar altogether. And here, just as another example, we see a picture where a suspicious region is pointed out by the arrow with the help of artificial intelligence. Again, it's really hard to see, like trained radiologists specialized in mammo images, they are still better than the artificial intelligence until today, but they're pretty close. And it definitely helps because not every radiologist is extremely specialized in this field. So in the zoomed in picture, there you can see the microcalcification. I don't know if you can see my mouse. It's really hard to see. It's only tiny little white dots. And then the AI program even estimated, if you see the error in the last picture, it's too small to read. Maybe it says a 92% chance that this microcalcification is malignant. And these algorithms are still in the testing phase. I read a couple of articles about it. It's not always that the 92% are right. It's still like, I think around 60% right, 40% not. So that's not perfect yet, but it's definitely a help. And these algorithms need to be tested. They need to be trained with some data, and that data needs to come from hospitals. Otherwise, the algorithm cannot improve. Here, I just wanted to show, this is an FDA-approved artificial intelligence surface, let's say, that can be used for mammo diagnostics. And they just implemented not just the microcalcification feature extraction, they also implemented, I think, kinetics and all these all these features that can be extracted that I explained before. And they put all of that together. And it is also pretty simple, because obviously for radiologists, it's extremely important that you don't have to make 100 clicks more, and that it is obvious where to find what you want. These is pretty simple, the surface of the program. Another thing where artificial intelligence is already used is in the screening for lung cancer, and it improved the mortality rate a lot in the lung cancer case. Darter is just one company, and they did practically what Maurice told you about the smart report. They started to combine tons of different data from laboratory parameters to the images, image extraction, even biopsies, combined everything together, risk factors, history of the patient, medical history, family history, and then estimated a risk for lung cancer. And that really improved the early diagnosis. The last example for radiology is AI in interventional radiology. Personally, I thought first that in interventional radiology, probably AI is not really used. And I found a group of women in interventional radiology in the summer, and I just asked in the group if some of them works with AI. And then one said, not really, don't have a clue. And then another one answered me kindly that there are actually a lot of ways where it is used already, and she sent me some papers. It is obviously not used in a way that a robot is trying to insert a catheter in a blood vessel or something like that, but it is used in the pre-procedural and in intra-procedural ways. So I know for those who don't know what interventional radiology is, it's when we go with a catheter through blood vessels to a target organ or a malformation or a tumor, and then minimally invasive can either just make an image of the suspicious region, or we can even treat the issue. And before the procedure, a major thing in artificial intelligence and interventional radiology, a major thing is to identify the patients that would benefit from this procedure. It's the same as in a surgery, obviously, but that's one of the main goals, and AI can help by that. Similar to the lung cancer screening here, if everything would be in a smart report, then also in interventional radiology, we could estimate which patients would benefit from this intervention. Also, we can use, for example, virtual reality for the radiologist to train the interventions itself. And what I liked most, where I also have, I think, pictures, is during the procedure. So what we can do these days is that we can put a 3D AI made picture on top of a 2D anatomic picture during the procedure, and that can help during the procedure to navigate the catheter better, for example, to speeding up the whole procedure time, less radiation is needed. So it could have a lot of benefits. Here in the picture, it was that it was a normal CT angiography, and a picture was taken, and then with the help of artificial intelligence, bleeding was found. And then with intervention, with the catheter guidance, this bleeding could be stopped. But you can see on the third picture, there's this area where the red, it's like a bit mushy reddish, where bleeding was detected, and then that helped during the procedure. In the next picture, this is is a picture where we have detection of prosthetic arteries. And again, it's a CT scan first of prosthetic arteries, and then a 3D roadmap was made that was then put on top of the anatomic features during the procedure, which just helped to figure out where exactly to go with a catheter, because that can be quite confusing sometimes. In this picture, we can see a virtual orthoscopy. So we have an anatomic picture, and from that anatomic picture, there's a complete virtual anatomic heart rebuild. And that could be used for training purposes, for example. And this last thing is even a little bit more fancy. There, it is a virtual aortic dissection angioscopy even. So that's what I meant with artificially created anatomical structures. The doctors can improve their skills without harming a patient and before the procedure even happening. Then are there any questions regarding that part? The rest is just basically our opinion in the summary. Let's see. Nope, I don't see a hand. Okay, let's get to the last part, digitalization and the future of radiology. So regarding the question that was asked, I think I answered that already. Yeah, we use artificial intelligence already partly to analyze images, but not yet to get to the full diagnose. This picture I really liked, where the machine is asking who's going to be responsible if there is a mistake happening, and the doctor just says, sorry, buddy, that comes with a job. Because that's going to be a big question, which is why it is also so important what Maurice mentioned with the regulations, the EU regulations. If we implement more and more algorithms, how is it going to be regulated? Who's going to be responsible if something there is not working properly? So coming to the current limitations, the AI algorithms in general, they are super data hungry. They need intensely big data sets to be trained on, and they're super complex. And if we talk about deep learning, we sometimes don't even fully understand what is happening in the algorithm itself, in tons of hidden layers. So that is definitely one limitation, because then we can't really predict if there are bias happening. The implementation process is also still complicated, because we cannot simply disrupt the mechanisms in the hospital. We're going to have continuously patients coming. So there needs to be a way to implement new AI programs within the everyday hospital life. And that sometimes can be complicated. It can cost a lot. We need specialists for that. Also, typical presentations of diseases, because we need this data set that is pre-labeled to train our machine learning algorithms. There are only specific features included. And as we also, or most of us study medicine, we know that humans are so different, and there are so many atypical presentations of diseases that they're not even slightly in the data sets yet. That is definitely a current limitation. Then cybersecurity, as I explained with the example of Estonia, and there's always a manipulation risk. So, for example, I know that in America, they're trying to work with hackers now, because obviously they're the ones understanding these algorithms the best. So I think in the future, we won't get around of, also having our own little hacker community, maybe, that we can hopefully trust. And then costs play a big role. Not only the development that takes a lot of time to create these artificial neural networks and the algorithms, and then the implementation of the algorithm in the working process and constant training of the staff, and also security. That will cost a lot at the current moment. Another thing, human intelligence can be acquired through even one simple observation without feedback. Whether AI software, they need to be trained, they need to look at billions of images, they need a constant feedback and need to be checked. So far, it's not optimal. The EU regulations I mentioned, ethical issues, obviously what's going to happen with our data, how secure is our data, who can look at our data. But if we want to improve these algorithms, then the companies that work on the algorithms need data sets. So it's this thin line between, yeah, we need to provide them with data, but how is it regulated? And then not even this company, it would be even better if they could share data. So I think there's one idea that not the images themselves, for example, are shared, but maybe if the images are coded into, like, I don't know, the sequence of numbers, then only that could be shared. So there are some ideas, but it's not figured out yet. And it needs to be EU-wide, maybe even globally. And a big point for us, we are, as physicians, still the ones responsible at the end of the day so far. So, which brings us to this funny picture that the people who are afraid of AI are usually the ones that also don't understand it, which I would say is the great majority of people, myself still included. But the neuronal network so far, as you can see, it's a cat and it says it's a dog. That is supposed to show that the network is still usually only as smart as the people creating it at the moment, I'm saying. Which brings us to next step in radiology. In the radiology department, even more than in other departments, we work with different programs. And we need to sign in maybe 100 times a day sometimes to open these programs for, I don't know, lab analysis is one program, then the patient file is one program, then the images are in 3 different programs. So there's definitely the need for a faster sign-in and maybe a way to regulate it, that it doesn't take so long. Also the uploading of images. Uniform data means that the data that is collected is somehow sorted before, so it can faster be used for the data, or faster be put in data sets to be used for algorithm development. Preliminary reports, something I talked to my dad about yesterday, that it would help a lot if these reports have some key features. For example, specific disease has specific key features that should be in the report. And then when we have some like similar reports for certain diseases or similar things that should be in this reports, then it would be easier for an AI algorithm to get to a diagnosis. So like standardized reports, but we are individuals. So obviously it's not that easy, but the more the data is organized, the easier that will get. And quantified reports means like to calculate something like the degree of a stenosis or something, and that is already happening. And it's something that is, at least from what my experience from the radiology department, I thought was a bit annoying when you sit there and then you have to use the tools there to measure the distances and then summarize them and then do that in several pictures. And it just takes a lot of time. So it would be great. That is one thing I think that would be great if an AI algorithm could tell you immediately the degree of the stenosis. Teleradiology is another thing that maybe at some point radiologists just sit at home and look at the images from their couch. It is happening to some extent. it is possible with some fields of radiology, with others less. For example, an interventional radiologist cannot sit on the couch and do minimal invasive interventions. Now coming to the last slides. For the prognosis, as we mentioned now 3 times already, the Apple Watch, I saw in the cardiology department during my internship that the Apple Watch of a lot of patients really signaled them arterial fibrillation and ventricular extrasystoles and signs like that. And then they went to the hospital, did proper examination, and it was even like heart attacks in some cases. So the Apple Watches are quite accurate by now. I think this will develop even further. Then, as we said, the AI EU global regulations, they need to be figured out some ways where we can work together, like with different countries together. And a lot of clinicians as scientists, what I want to say with that is this fear that the AI will overtake our jobs. A lot of the scientists working on AI, they are actually also clinicians, at least in the field of radiology. I'm only talking about that right now. And they say that a lot of their colleagues just don't understand what AI is and how it can help. So I think a lot of them will, I think this will progress and a lot more radiologists will work in the field and will understand it. And all innovation companies are researched, really all of them, at least obviously they have to say that, but they say they have the goal to help the doctors and not to replace them. So to speed up processes, but not to replace the doctors. So these are things from my experience. So one is a quote where I sadly don't remember the name. Radiology needs to become the new pathology. And the picture I set where all the images were combined with on molecular level till the pure anatomy. I think that's what this doctor meant. It was a congress where I heard it. And I think it's just showing where it could go. The next one, Axel Röber, is chief doctor in the department I worked, and he just said that AI is the future of every radiologist, and it is not possible to get around it. If you don't go along with it, you will be overrun. If you take part, you can make a huge difference. And he also explained, when he started, he explained people how to use a mouse for the computer. They didn't know where to click, how to move, and he is, I think, 60 now or something. So it's just insane how fast technology develops. And I think his prediction is pretty accurate. Then my father, Jürgen Schönwelder, we talked yesterday. I also asked him what he thinks is going to happen. He's working as a radiologist for, well, about 40 years maybe. And he also says that we won't get around AI, but it won't replace doctors either. It might be less fun to do patient reports if a lot of things are pre-given, and he recommends that interventional radiology is definitely part of the future for radiologists, because that will grow. It's pretty interesting and it can't easily be taken over by AI. And then one last thing, I was a bit shocked because I asked an MTA in the radiology department why they don't use AI programs that would be available for feature extraction or for telling them which region of the body they should scan in case, for example, they should only scan 3 vertebrae. Then they scaled the MRI machine themselves to the 3 vertebrae instead of using the AI algorithms. And her answer was that they purposely don't use the AI programs because then no one would know how to use the machine. And she does have a valid point there, I would say. Also, I realized that none of the doctors there, of the younger doctors, was able to use an MRI machine, a CT machine, or even a simple X-ray. And I think we need to find a balance there between using advanced new techniques, but not completely forget how the basics work. And you almost through. This is our very last slide. Called Maurice yesterday, and we both talked about our personal opinion. And often, as I said, doctors can be the biggest challenge for companies that want to develop new innovative algorithms, because we don't trust, we don't understand, and we fear to be replaced. But these algorithms need data. I cannot say it often enough. So in the future, somehow it needs to be regulated that data is shared in some format. And if we don't deal with it, someone will. This is this vacuum that I talked about. It will be filled. And I rather personally want to have it regulated than unregulated or just by one private company. And we put this in big letters because both of us agreed that education is the key here. Self-education, education starting in school, but also in our medical program. We haven't had this topic at all, I think. And it is so important to at least roughly understand it, because at the end, we need to decide whether these algorithms that should be implemented are useful if we work in the hospital. So we still have the last saying to some extent, and we still have the responsibility. So it is extremely important to understand some parts of it. And we also think that practicability, costs, and knowledge are factors. The cost is current limitation, but as Maurice explained, they could decrease over the time. Practicability means that these algorithms need to be easily implemented in the workflow. That's why it's so important that radiologists work together with the ones that designing the algorithms, so that they also know what is important in order to make it as easy as possible to integrate it and less clicks, for example. So this is it from, oops, technical genius. But this is it from us for now. Sorry that we took so long. Are there any questions till this point? If not, then I just want to repeat that the society is dormant at the moment, but if someone is interested, ask ICER and activate it again.
I have a question.
Yep, sure.
Does our university have any research with AI, or like any departments which work with it?
I did not see research, but there's definitely a list with all the research that you can apply for. But last time I checked, there was nothing specific for AI.
Okay.
I know that the head of the department from radiology is a super nice guy. If you're interested, you can probably just contact him if you have an idea for research, though. He's open to it.